We've all seen or heard these comments, especially over the last few years, and it's dumb as shit. Today I'm jumping on to tell you what ADHD is and how it affects people with it, plus a little bit of mild trauma dumping. Neurotypicals, this is a place for you to learn and ask questions, and for the Neurospicy fam, please feel free to leave comments down below on anything I might have missed in this video. Okay, ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder according to healthdirect.gov.au. Around 1 in 20 Australians has ADHD. ADHD affects the brain's executive functioning, meaning its ability to self-regulate and control thoughts, words, actions, and emotions. In simpler terms, this can mean that people with ADHD may find it difficult to focus and prioritize. For adults, in day-to-day life, this can look like missed deadlines and forgetting important dates for meetings and appointments, or my personal favorite, walking home from the shops with your groceries even though you drove there and not realizing until you get home and see that your car isn't in the carport. I've done this a couple of times. There are 3 types of ADHD. We have the inattentive type, which used to be called ADD, Attention Deficit Disorder. Then there's hyperactive impulsive. Now you can have one of these and not display any or many of the traits of the other type, or you can be like me and have combined type. Woo! To be diagnosed, you have to show a pattern of inattention and or hyperactivity and impulsivity in multiple settings. For me, I didn't start realizing anything until I was about 9 or 10 years old, yet I didn't know what it was and didn't seek my diagnosis until my late 20s. I remember I just moved to New Zealand and a teacher at my new school put me in a gate class. For a few hours a week, myself and a handful of other students would go to our library and we'd work on these weird puzzles and things in that realm. And I felt so dumb amongst these kids, like they were insanely smart and they were solving all these obscure puzzles and shit, ones I couldn't even understand without the teacher like full on breaking them down for me. And even then I was still Not long after starting it, I remember asking my teacher why she'd put me in GATE, and she just responded with, "I think you just think differently to other people," and that really stuck with me. Over the next few years, I can remember doing really well in subjects I enjoyed, English, anything arty or creative, but the things I didn't do well in, that was a whole other thing. Math, even now, can just fuck right off for all I care. I breezed by, doing pretty well in my first few years of high school where I thought it mattered. The subjects I was bad at, the teachers would say things like I was lazy, uninterested, unwilling to learn, which just further enforced the internal shame I already had. I didn't understand it, but the shitty thing about being a teen is it's really easy to act on all of those things and no one says anything further. Well, just because, you just become another grumpy 15-year-old who doesn't care about anything and just doesn't take her future seriously. So this is where my heaviest masking came from, and I put that mask on, I made a joke of it for the next few years. A teacher would comment on my shitty marks and I just respond with like, only people like going to uni care about this stuff. In my last few years of school, it only got harder. I was working a restaurant job in the evenings and had a lot of responsibilities at home. It was easy to continue the angry teen thing when you were already tired and doing bad in school. But when the subjects I enjoyed started getting harder and harder, the shame spirals and anxiety began to get worse, especially when it seemed so easy for everyone else. This is a pretty common theme amongst people who haven't been diagnosed. School is hard for anyone, and then just chuck a little bit of undiagnosed neurospice in there and you're in for a shitty time with unrivaled amounts of low self-esteem. Looking back over my childhood and up until recently, I can now see a bunch of the signs that pointed to ADHD, but I did just enough to go unnoticed at the time. This is pretty common, especially for women. I'll do another video about that later because it's a whole broad subject. Around the time I was starting school, I remember my mum getting frustrated at me because I wouldn't do the things she asked me to do. So naturally, I got taken to do a hearing test. I was probably only 5 or 6 at the time, and the only thing I remember about it is I had to put on a pair of headphones. And every time I heard a beep, I had to put a little plastic dinosaur into a red bucket. I love dinosaurs and the color red, so it seemed like a pretty cool thing to be doing. I didn't miss an opportunity to pick up a new dinosaur and absolutely nailed that. Why can't you read your sentence? You wrote this. And I absolutely nailed that fucking test. That's what I did. So I think it was just written off as me being easily distracted. Like all kids who watch a lot of TV. I was always the kid who was blurting out answers that were wrong to unfinished questions or yelling out dumb things to get a laugh out of the class. I was always up to try anything or go on an adventure, or I was an extremely active teen who didn't sit still. I was always tapping a pen or shaking my legs and pissing people off, or doodling on my books or my arms. And when I developed an interest in something, it was all I could think about. I started kart racing when I was 12, and for the next 2 years it consumed my brain and all of my spare time. It's the reason I got into filming anything. Even as an adult, if I start a new book and I'm enjoying it, chances are it's finished the next day. I will literally wake up thinking about it. I can't stop until I know how it ends. Going to work actually infuriates me when I know I'm only half done with whatever I'm reading. This is called hyperfixation. It's a blessing and a curse, often one of the many symptoms ADHDers experience. Neurotypicals see it as some sort of superpower, and so do we when there's a deadline. But it can also be a huge drainer for us. It can lead to extreme periods of burnout and fatigue. This hyperfixation it's a whole other topic, and it requires its own video, so I'll probably do that one next. I'm just gonna pause, I think my partner's home. Pause.
Neurodivergent screening tests will be like, do you struggle with wearing socks? And neurodivergent people will be like, nope, does not describe me, for you see, I have a system. And that, my dear sweet neurodivergent friends, is what that question is getting at.
This TikTok was super funny to me because the clinic where I was diagnosed sends you a 300 question questionnaire to be completed before they even see you. And a lot of the questions were like this one in the TikTok. And so many of my answers weren't a simple yes or no, but they should have been. And for the typical person, they would be, but not me. I had a paragraph answer for nearly every question. Like, how often do I fidget or squirm with my hands or feet when you have to sit down for a long time? And my brain naturally goes, well, that's circumstantial. Am I watching a movie or a TV show that I haven't seen before, and am I really excited about it? What was I doing prior to the task? Am I sitting in a boring work meeting where we talk about the same OH&S protocols that have been in place for my entire life? Is it something exciting and engaging? Have I just had something to eat? Or am I sitting through a 3-hour Zoom meeting in a group environment where my boss literally begs me not to yell out anything dumb or ask questions at the higher-ups who are out of touch with base level procedures? These are many of the things I have to take into consideration before I even begin to answer the above question. That last one actually happened to me just prior to my diagnosis. In that time, I deconstructed a rubber band ball and rebuilt it twice in the first 15 minutes of that shitty Zoom meeting. For each one of the symptoms that they were looking for when assessing what type of ADHD I have, I had a list at least this long of questions about the situations in which they apply in. ADHD brains work a little differently, especially when it comes to regulating behavior and reward systems. Everyone needs some level of engagement in order to function well. Generally, the typical brain is stimulated through day-to-day things. They get dopamine and are generally pretty good at self-regulating and have adequate control over their own behavior. ADHD brains have their own rules. They seek their own methods of stimulation rather than what society labels as important. I've been told I have issues with being told what to do and don't always gel well with authority. Often this can be seen as us making the conscious decision to ignore external demands. Internal motivation is often more intrinsically meaningful to our brains, which equals more dopamine. This means we can really struggle with long-term reward-based systems. We want the happy chemicals, and we want them now. Why would I do something consistently every day or every week for a sustained period of time when I could just go and spend a stupid amount of money right now and buy something that will make me happy right now? Now, this dopamine chasing, it's awesome for some and terrible for others. It often makes us riskier in decision making. We have a much higher likeliness to develop a substance addiction. But we also work incredibly well in emergency situations because when a lot of people freeze, that's when our brains kick into gear. No one knows exactly the cause behind ADHD. There are definitely genetic and environmental factors involved, but there are treatment options, therapy and medication. There's also a pretty big rise in ADHD coaches who specialize in this. The earlier people get diagnosed, the earlier they can implement these strategies and learn to work with their brains and not against them. Getting diagnosed later in life means you have a bunch to unlearn and a bunch of fuck. Yep, you have to have a bunch of fuck. Getting diagnosed later in life means you have to unlearn a bunch of neurotypical habits that society ingrains in everyone. It's not very fun and leads to periods of grieving the life you could have had if you'd been diagnosed earlier. Well, this ended up being a lot longer than I expected, and the fuckload more mistakes. I'm going to launch into some of these ideas further in the upcoming videos, but if you have any specific questions you want answered or just want to share something, then please leave a comment down below. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Smash the like and subscribe button because I need validation. Thanks. Bye.